And we should be live for the Steelers Depot live stream here on Monday, February 8th. Well, as always, Dave Bryan and I are here for the next hour, 7 to 8 p.m., answering any and all of your guys' Steelers questions. Be sure to ask them in the chat below. I already have several questions in we can't wait to tackle. And if you want to be ensured that your question gets asked and answered, you can send Dave and I a super chat, and we'll get to that as soon as possible. As always, Dave Bryan is here with me. Dave, how you doing?
Happy Monday. Happy first day of the off season.
Yeah, Super Bowl 55 now in the rear view window with Tom Brady winning his 7th Super Bowl. And just off the top, I have the article up on the live stream right now, and maybe I shouldn't be this upset about it as I am, but Peter King's Hall of Fame vote, the inconsistencies, the actual voting themselves, just really horrific for a guy with such an important platform. I think he's abusing it in a lot of unfortunate ways. Dave, what do you think?
Is that a question?
Yeah, I guess it was more of a lead-in to just your thoughts on King saying that Faneca was not on his Hall of Fame ballot, voting for Peyton this year, not voting for Troy last year. I just can't make any sense of the direction he wants to go in.
Yeah, look, and hopefully I explained that out, as good as I possibly can in the post there. You go back to just what was it last year, and him trying to explain why he left Troy Polamalu off of his final final five modern era player ballot there, and reasoning was, well, Troy was a lock, so I figured I'd give support the other way. And then you turn around and one of the sentences he used in the explanation of why he didn't vote for Faneca this time around was that Peyton Manning was a lock, essentially. And he voted that way. Okay, so all right, look, make no mistake about it. Peyton Manning was more of a lock this year than Troy Polamalu was last year. Now, both obviously were locks to some degree. I would contend that Peyton Manning was 100% lock, whereas Troy Polamalu probably somewhere in the 90% range there. But weird flex on his part. Is that how the kids say it these days?
I guess.
It makes no sense whatsoever. Look, if you just want to come right out and say, I didn't think Faneca was deserving, but try to give all this other hullabaloo about Clay Matthews and John Lynch and how Alan Faneca was deserving as well, but in the same breath say, well, I had to vote, in so many words, I had to vote for Peyton Manning. You look really hypocritical, in that aspect of it there. So, yeah, look, as I told Alex on the podcast this morning, I grew up reading Peter King, and really revered him as a longtime NFL writer. And boy, the last couple of years, man, I don't get this guy. And to me, it's embarrassing and it's very disrespectful to the whole Pro Football Hall of Fame voting, what it all has transpired here in the last couple of years. Look, once again, was Alan Faneca a lock to get in this year? No. And I think a year ago I penned an article about this same time after the 2020 class was announced, saying that, man, look at these first-time ballot guys coming in here. 3 of those guys are probably going to be locks there. That leaves Faneca fighting for 1 or 2 spots there. Hopefully he doesn't get shafted that time there. So, just absurd, really, is the best way to leave it.
I agree. All right, let's jump into the questions here, starting with Jonathan Mason, who says, what are your overall thoughts on the offensive staff now that all positions have been filled? I think, with Canada, it's not a surprise. We've talked about how that's trying to thread the needle between old and new. A guy who's been here only for 1 year, but at least is known to the Steelers, and there's some level of continuity there. I think getting Alfredo Roberts to be the tight ends coach was a smart move, a really veteran guy to replace one of the longest tenured coaches in James Daniel. Adrian Clem, we'll see. I don't want to speculate too much on how good of a coach he is. Obviously, he has been an accomplished coach in the college ranks at SMU and UCLA. Just the process of it seemed weird to me, but we're not privy to some of those inside baseball type things. And then the moves announced today, Mike Sullivan as the quarterback's coach. I think Dave and I are both fine with that. Chris Morgan as assistant O-line coach, I think, is a solid hire. Really, nothing to gripe about there.
Yeah, it just has a feel of short and long, right? Has a feel of short, meaning if Ben Roethlisberger returns, at least he comes back to some familiar faces on the offensive side of the ball there, and Long in essence that. Canada's young and Clem's young, and we expect at the very least an offensive lineman or two to come in via the draft, and who knows about quarterback. That obviously could go either way this year, and if not this year, you would think most definitely next year. So I just would have liked to seen a little bit more age in there. Sullivan obviously has some age to him, so that's good to see. As does the tight end coach. They got a little bit of mix of young and old there, and. Look, all right, don't tell me about the labor pains now. Show me the baby here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if they can get that offensive line going, that running game going, and see if they can make, assuming Roethlisberger returns, one last charge at this thing.
And thank you, Jonathan, for listening to the podcast, talking about my reference to James Harrison and how I think he's got maybe the best shot of any Steeler not named Ben to get into the Hall over the next couple of years, although I still don't know exactly how strong Debo's odds are. Mike Adesso referencing the podcast as well. He sent in the email talking about our top 5. He's saying the point was an exercise to see your early thoughts on top 5 skill positions and then ask again in April and see how things have progressed with your hard work and final predictions. I understand it's early in the process. Yeah, that's fair, but I still don't even have a top 5 for the positions right now. I just don't even create a ranking, because once you create a ranking, it's hard to change your mind. You feel like, oh, should I do this, or am I biased? I just don't even want to start with any sort of just overall ranking from the national media's side of things. I'll just put mine together as I go throughout the process and come out with a ranking maybe by the end of the draft process.
And then look, we usually like to look at this, or I always look at this thing from a Steelers perspective too. Not everybody, there might be a player or two in a national, let's say Pro Football Focus and their top 5 that just really isn't a good fit for the Steelers. Mm-hmm. Just what they look at or character or all like that. So, when we get to that point when we have like a top 5 at each position there, it's going to be heavily, at least on my side, it's going to be heavily slanted towards what I think the Steelers like and what I think the Steelers would go after versus maybe, there might be 2 names in there that or somebody else's top 5 that I don't think the Steelers would have interest in.
Right. Again, be sure to ask your questions in the comments. Dave and I are here till 8 p.m. Eastern Time answering as many as we can. Here's one from Verdon Barzy. Says, what are you guys' thoughts on TJ not getting Defensive Player of the Year? Now, after looking at the Super Bowl, should Steelers go defense on pick number 24 since top O-linemen and quarterbacks will be gone? Verdon, if you listen to the podcast today, Dave and I talk about that a lot. I don't think either of us are surprised that Aaron Donald won the award. I know on Thursday in my mailbag, I said that Donald had a 60% chance of winning it, so I'm not shocked by it by any means, nor is it some sort of highway robbery or travesty or unbelievable selection that Aaron Donald was voted there. We knew it really was a toss-up between Donald and TJ Watt. My vote obviously would have gone to TJ Watt. I think he deserved it. I think you lead the league in sacks. You're better in every single category statistically than Aaron Donald. You're deserving of winning the award. And I understand Donald gets doubled more and those things like that, but I'm not sure how much better Watt needed to be then to get the award over Aaron Donald, or do we just give it to Aaron Donald every single year, regardless of what numbers may say?
Yeah, and my thoughts were I had a stronger thought that Watt would win the award up until right after the season ended, and you start seeing, some of these, especially that NFL.com article and the voting that they did, and how Donald had edged out Watt at that point, and you look at the Pro Football Writers Association and what their results were and all like that. From the end of the season on, you really started to get this sinking feeling that maybe TJ Watt wasn't going to win it. Mm-hmm. My vote would have went for TJ Watt. I understand why those who voted the other way voted that way. It's unfortunate. So, I think the bigger question is now moving forward from this is, and you hit on it, is what exactly does TJ Watt have? Is it got to be a 20 sack season?
Right.
For that, and people say, well, look, Aaron Donald had more forced fumbles than TJ Watt. I know that is one thing that I pointed to a few times. I think maybe in podcasts or on Twitter throughout the season was, oh man, the only thing where TJ Watt's not living up to the previous season was the forced fumbles there. Mm-hmm. But on the flip side, they sure weren't calling holding this year on offensive linemen, especially on the edge there with the tackles there. So, Yeah, what can you do at this point? You can write about it and complain about it, but it's not going to change the decision there. So you just kind of have to really wonder at this point, what does T.J. Watt need to do to actually win the award, or
Mm-hmm.
what doesn't Aaron Donald have
Yeah.
to do to not win it?
Right. And Donald did have more forced fumbles, but only by 2. It was 4-2. So it wasn't like Donald had 10 and there was some sort of massive gap between the two. But I hear you. I echo your thoughts, Dave. Pittman says Tar Heels running back Javonte Williams will electrify the Steelers' offense, and linebacker Zaven Collins from Tulsa will be the man on the defense, period. A lot of buzz about Zaven Collins, some of the national media guys mocking Collins to Pittsburgh, and I think it's a fit. I think it makes sense. Is it the biggest need for what Pittsburgh needs right now? That I think is more debatable, but Collins himself seems to be a heck of a prospect who's kind of gotten comps to some sort of Lawrence Timmons, Dante Hightower kind of a guy.
How did he? I mean, he's a Planet Theory guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of those ones. Yeah, how does he compare size? I wonder what he. I forgot. I meant to look at this with the other Edmonds kid. Obviously, not Terrell Edmonds, but
Tremaine Edmonds.
Tremaine Edmonds. How does he match up from height weight standpoint?
I think Collins is heavier. I don't remember exactly what Tremaine was coming out of Virginia Tech, but
Collins is like 260.
Yeah. I think Edmonds was lighter. I mean, I think they're about the similar height, and they're both kind of freaky athletes, Planet guys, as you said, but I'm 99% sure Collins was a lot heavier.
And just technically speaking, if you look at some of the past articles that Alex does really every year, kind of looking at what the Steelers look at when it comes to certain position groups, only from a measurable standpoint, Collins doesn't fit that mold. I mean, he's taller and obviously heavier as well too. So not that means anything.
Right. For the freaks, usually it's an outlier because those guys just don't show up that often.
Right. What I was getting at is not that it means anything in the grand scheme of things. It's just one other thing that we sort of look at,
Right. And again, just do you take an inside linebacker? Now, Vince gets cut. I mean, that opens the door more. Spillane, of course, is still there, and UG3 is a dart throw with Marcus Allen, but it's just hard to see defense being the pick at 24. I mean, depending on how the board breaks, and that's the comment here I think about. We'll get into a second about running back and stuff like that, but yeah, it's just tough to see another defensive player go at 24. Pittman also says I like Notre Dame quarterback Ian Book in the 3rd or 4th round. Book, I know, is a really productive guy, great winner at Notre Dame. I just feel like he's one of those classic cases of much better college quarterback than he'll be in the NFL. Jonathan Mason, this is a question for Dave. Dave, I know you don't like running back in the 1st round, but if there's a big drop-off after Harris and Etienne, does that make you more willing to take one of those two if available? Your thoughts?
Not so much the difference between the two as much it is what else is on the board. Kevin Colbert would tell you that depending on how close it is, basically, where's the drop off, saying that we're not going to reach down for a player just at this position just because he's the next one on the board if we have another guy at another position ranked differently. Personally, and I obviously have looked at the at Najee Harris and NTN as well too. Najee Harris is leaps and bounds better. The best running back, I think, in this class, at least from what I've seen. There's nothing that tells me that there's a running back better than him. I wouldn't reach just for the sake of reaching. Now, look, I've already, come to the fact that just because I don't like drafting running backs in the 1st round, just from a value 1st round draft pick standpoint, that it doesn't necessarily mean that the Steelers won't. I mean, look, if Najee Harris is on the board at 24 overall, it's going to be mighty tough for the Steelers to turn that down. So, would I put NTN in that same sentence right now? No.
I don't know if your thoughts are fully formulated yet. I know you like Harris. I know Harris is your top back and probably will stay in that spot, barring something significant, correct?
Right. I mean, that guy's phenomenal.
Right.
I mean,
do you think, I know obviously you're the king of fungibility with the running back position. Do you think Harris, putting aside what the Steelers may do or will want to do you think Harris is worth the 24th pick of the draft? Knowing he's a great talent, but then the competing thought is, well, running backs just don't mean as much as almost any other position.
My biggest fear is the history of the position of running backs drafted in general, and the overall fungibility of the
Right.
position. If he stays healthy and can play 90% of the games from in the first 4 years, and then obviously live up to that first round billing, then fine and good. But we have seen the fungibility factor in the NFL, and how quickly some of these top backs look. Every instant, you can't just say, well, these 4 guys got hurt, that means this guy is going to get hurt.
Sure.
But there is a track record there.
Right.
I mean,
Nature
look
of the
at
position.
look at McCaffrey, and like it or not, Derrick Henry is obviously cut from a different cloth as well too. But you look at the wear and tear that kid now has on him after 2 consecutive seasons. Man, you really have to wonder how much he, at some point you just run the wheels off of these kids. And once again, if you are going to spend a first round draft pick on a back, it better be one that you can throw out there day one and leave him out on the field, meaning he can play, for the most part, 85 to 90% of the snaps, pass, protect, catch out of backfield, all of it there.
So it doesn't sound like you're really crazy about the idea of drafting Harris at 24, even though you recognize the talent that he offers.
Just from the historical aspect and the fungibility aspect of the running back position.
Okay. I get that. I totally get that. I just didn't know where you came in at, because I know you like Harris. I'm a big fan of Harris too, but there is those.
I love him. He's fun to watch on tape. I mean, there's no denying that. I mean, leaping over people and all. He can run inside. He can run outside. He can catch out a backfield. It seems like he can pass protect okay. I mean, what's not like to like about him? So within that, not that we get into, he's not going to be on the board and all like that. I mean, if he is the top back, how many times do you see those top backs fall down to the 24th pick overall?
True. That's a good point. He may not be there, and this might be an entirely moot conversation. I got to say, before our next question, I was looking at the article that you wrote, I think really good, about Ben being maybe the next Steelers Hall of Famer. This mock-up of the bust for Ben, I'm not sure what's going on here, Dave, with whoever made this for ESPN.
That has the old messy feel.
Yeah.
Right?
What is with the eyes here? Did you, the left eye small? Weird.
Yeah, that's obviously that was part of it, and I credit it to ESPN. It's in an article several years ago that they had. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe Ben got poked in the eye while he was getting busted.
Is this like right after Haloti Ngata broke his nose or something?
Yeah, you'll poke your eye out with that thing.
Yeah, that's not our handiwork, but I just
your eye out.
Yeah, good Christmas Story reference here. Mike Adesso says, anyone know the current contract situation with Tampa Bay tight end Cameron Brate? Sure would look good in black and gold. I'd even trade a 4th this year for him. Thoughts? I think we mentioned Brate's name before. I don't know his contract status. I believe he's under contract for at least another season. And would I be opposed to trading for him? Probably not, but I just am kind of tired of trading for tight ends and signing him in for agency, having him for a year or two, then move on for the next guy to trade or sign. I'd rather just draft one, but you guys know that's the hill I've been dying on for several seasons now.
He's scheduled to earn in 2021 $6.5 million. So you got Eric Ebron earning what six and a half, something along those lines there. So hard to imagine that they'd have 2 tight ends earning that kind of money. Now, obviously, if you did trade, and he's 30, I don't know when he's turning 30, but I think sometime during the season he turns 30 as well too. So are you really going to trade for someone with that age and with that salary? An argument could be made that if the Steelers wanted to do something like that, they could trade for him and turn around and turn that a large portion of that $6.25 million base salary, or a good portion of the 6.5 overall money that he's scheduled to make, turn that into a signing bonus and lower his cap, at least for 2021 that way. But, with his age and all, are you going to turn around and have to cut him a year later and have that dead money associated with that? So, look, talented guy. I just don't think the Steelers are going to have any interest in him. Now, if he's cut, that's a different story. If you could get him for a veteran minimum or something like that. But they didn't sign it. How long ago was it that they signed him to that contract? What was it, 2018 or something?
Sounds about
think.
Right. OJ Howard might be the better Buccaneer tight end because he's coming off that injury. He's still on his rookie deal, I think. So maybe that'd be an option. Steelers like their pedigree.
I mean, it depends on the price, right?
Right. I mean, I imagine he'll be pretty cheap coming off a torn Achilles, but I don't know exactly where he comes in at.
Kevin Colbert likes that pedigree, and he likes it better when that pedigree is cheap.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. All right, Jason Apricot has a super chat for $1.99. Thank you so much, Jason. I don't see any text associated with it, but I'll read a comment that he said a couple minutes before that. It says David T was a joy to have on, as most guests are. He absolutely was, Jason. The podcast is so addicting and a part of my commute to work. We're an addicting presence, Dave. Apparently, you and I.
Oh, just like me, my personality and my habits, right?
Yeah.
I've got an addictive personality there, so it's very easy for me to get addicted to things at all as well. Look, it's still, I don't think it has fully sunk in yet, with Dave T. And every time I start thinking about him and talking about him in long breaths here, I start tearing up a little bit here. Man, I will never forget that first time we had him on the podcast. Man, I didn't know what hit us.
Yeah.
Had to go back and listen to that thing 2 or 3 times, and every time you interviewed Dave T, you thought you were ready for it, and you really weren't. I always joke that you give him one name and you get 10 back. Just an incredible gift of gab when it comes to really any players. Had a really good had a good overview sense really of what the Steelers needed and who the Steelers were talking to in any given year, and passed along a lot of great tips over the years to us on the show as well too. So man, I wish there was some way he could get a little bit more notoriety somehow, some way. I couldn't help but think back. They just had that Al Davis 30 for 30 on ESPN. What was it, last Thursday or Wednesday or whatnot there? And I kept remembering back to how Dave T used to handwrite scouting reports for Al Davis.
Right.
Or in the early age. I think Dave T was something like 14 or 15 years old or something like that. So one of those pioneers there when it comes to YouTube scouting, I guess, and it was way before YouTube, obviously. There, so yeah, Dave T. As long as I live, will always have a place in my heart, and I'll never forget him.
Well said. Maybe we can find that first interview on the podcast with Dave T from several years ago and pull that back up as a fun memory for this draft season. Charlie Doyle says, do you hope to see Ben as the starting quarterback next year? If not, who? I'm fine with Ben coming back. I'm not opposed to it. I know some people are ready to move on from Ben, but as I wrote this morning in an article for Steelers Depot, I think the time is now to start planning and looking actively so for Ben's heir, not for 2021, but for 2022. And so that means evaluating guys like Trey Lance and Mac Jones and Kyle Trask. And if you deem any of those guys to be a potential franchise quarterback, I think you have to do everything reasonably within your power to go get that guy, whether that means potentially moving up or taking them if they're there at 24. And so my stance of build around Ben and for Ben, which is where I've been in the past, has now changed because we assume 2021 will be Ben's final year. So my stance has changed to the building's on fire. We don't have a plan post Ben. Let's go find that quarterback and hope we're right.
Let me pose this to you. There's something I've been tossing around, Alex, that I think I'm going to write about. So everybody listening here, you get a kind of a little bit of a heads up of maybe where my mind's at and something that I'm working on right here. And it's going to be something titled along the lines of the $5 million question concerning Ben Roethlisberger. And in essence, just kind of an overview what's floating around in my head. And if you hear that, please ignore the rocks. Technically, if the Steelers and Roethlisberger were to part ways right now, the Steelers would save what? $19 million in salary cap space, right?
Yep.
Okay, now you got to factor in the roster displacement cost right there. So assuming the low spot on the 50 rule of 51 is the $660,000, that automatically takes your cap savings down to, let's say, $18.4 million. You with me?
With you.
Okay. Now, assuming they do one of these long 4-year extensions with Ben with voidable years, there's no new money involved. Everything that we've talked about on the podcast, and I've written on the site about Ben Roethlisberger, one of the options with him would wind up saving how much in cap space? Around 14.34, if memory serves me, right?
Yep.
All right, so what's the difference between 14.34 million and 18 point, what would it be, like 5-6 million?
Maybe about 4 million.
Okay, let's call it 5 million. Okay.
Okay.
Is it worth bringing Roethlisberger back for an extra savings, for an extra cost of $5 million. Okay. That's technically, I guess, what you could boil this down to. Correct. Now, obviously, people are jumping out of their seat right now saying, "Well, what about all that potential dead money that you create in 2022 there?" But by going that route, well, you simply do. When you and I had a long discussion about what the Steelers might do if they do sign Roethlisberger to one of these 4-year extensions at all, something where they would be able to do something to even lessen the dead money hit in 2022 by making him a post-June casualty if they could get him agreed to move the salary, yada yada that way. So don't look at it from the dead money standpoint in let's say 2022. Look at it from a pure cap savings differential in 2021 alone of let's say $5 million. Is it worth spending that extra $5 million? Now, look, there's still nothing that says that you can't go into this year's draft and go get you a quarterback, right?
Right, and that was what I basically posed in this morning's article.
Okay, so what if I gave you the best of both worlds here? What if I told everybody listening to this? Okay, you can go ahead and draft yourselves a quarterback, whatever round, first, second, third, seventh, whatever. You can do that. But at the same time, it's just costing you an additional $5 million in cap space by keeping Roethlisberger as is. That way, if the team goes south in a hurry in 2021, you can either decide to take a longer look at Mason Rudolph, or you could put that kid quarterback in there as well too. So, is it fair to maybe pose the question that way? As is basically, has Ben Roethlisberger worth a $5 million shot to see what he can have at the start of the season? Because once again, you only save technically $18.4 million in cap space if you part ways with him now, as opposed to extending him out and saving $14.34 million in cap space by doing a 4-year, no new money, avoidable year. So, that maybe that's something for people to ponder.
Yeah.
Did everybody follow me there? Did you follow me there, Alex?
Yeah, I did. Comment if you follow, Dave. I think that was easy to follow. Yeah, I think that's an interesting and unique way to frame it. And I think obviously the answer to that is it is worth it. I think the case to make if you wanted to cut Ben or move on from Ben is a point that you've made several times on the podcast, where you cut Ben if you think he's washed or the team, even with Ben, just really has no legitimate chance to make any sort of run at this thing. And to any degree, like I know I'm pretty down on their chances of actually winning a Super Bowl next season, but I still think they exist. But if you're in that camp where you just feel like there's really no feasible, plausible path to making this thing work with Ben, then you move on and just start taking as many bites at the apple as you can, finding his replacement. Unless you're in that camp, I think you roll with Ben for one more season.
All right, but it makes sense that it's realistically it's a $5 million question, correct? You could, assuming they do what we think that they're going to do with his contract here in the next 4 or 5 weeks.
Right. No, I get your point entirely. Yes.
Okay.
All right.
I hope everybody followed along in there, because that's and like I said, this is something I've been tossing around. I'll probably write about it here within the next 48 hours. So hopefully I explained that out properly. That essentially it's a $5 million chance on Roethlisberger in 2021.
And Ike Taylor would say no to that. He says Ben should not return. We'll set the Steelers back if Ben comes back. Again, be sure to ask your questions in the comments below. Dave and I here for the next half hour. Probably do these live streams every other Monday for the foreseeable future. Maybe pick things back up more around free agency and the draft. Carson Hoffman says, do you think the Steelers will draft a running back first round? I think it's possible. I think they really like Najee Harris, so if it's not Harris, it probably won't be any of the other running backs. But if Harris is there at 24, I think it'll be a tough guy to pass on Pittsburgh. Of course, depends on how the rest of the board looks and how free agency went and things like that. But Najee Harris, I think, would be very high on the team's radar. Question here from Mark Ralston. Steelers seem to have more success at drafting wide receivers than DBs. Would signing Sutton and Hilton be wiser than Juju if they have necessary cap room you guys have described? Yeah, I get that, and I think you want to bring back just one of Sutton or Hilton out of principle, out of that they're good players, they're versatile, they help give yourself more versatility in your game planning and just handling all that offenses throw at you in this day and age. So I think out of that alone, you definitely want to bring one of Sutton or Hilton back. And then after that, if you have additional room for Juju, then I'm all for it. But I do think if you lose both guys, Sutton and Hilton, it really sets your defense back in some pretty significant ways.
Yeah, I would agree there. Hopefully they'll be able to get themselves in some position to at least maybe bring Sutton back.
McDave,
especially if they think they can make a run at this thing, you know.
McDave Kleenord says, do you think the Steelers and Ben will reach an agreement this week, or do you think the Steelers will move on? Yeah, Ben's supposed to be meeting with Tomlin or the front office in some capacity today, tomorrow, sometime after the Super Bowl was what the report was, and I think what Art Rooney said. I don't know if an agreement will happen this week. There's still some time to hammer these things out. It is a lot of math and variables that have to be discussed and agreed upon, but I do think they will reach an agreement at some point before his March bonus is due.
Oh, absolutely, they will. I mean, we're almost exactly 5 weeks away. What is it? Wednesday, I think, marks the 5 week mark for the start of the new league year, and they'll have to get pen and paper. I suspect the actual. If it's decided that he will return and his contract will get restructured, however they deem it necessary, that usually it's Ben's birthday that all that stuff usually happens around, and I believe that's March the 3rd. So obviously any time from maybe the last week of February on through about March 3rd, 4th, or 5th, right around in there, if it's not announced sooner, publicly than that. I mean, we'll definitely find out when the NFLPA number moves, that way if we're not told otherwise there. But I have a feeling we'll know within at latest a couple of days, by Roethlisberger's birthday.
Pink King Colton W says TJ Watt, Professional Defensive Player of the Year snub. Steeler Fan 1933 says hello Alex, Dave, and Steelers Nation. Hello Steeler Fan. Tyler Moore says, say the salary cap comes in around 185. Do you think the Steelers would be able to sign a running back like Jamal Williams and or tight end like Gerald Everett? Also thoughts on if they would be good fits. I think the first thing you do, Tyler, in free agency, if the cap comes in 185, is sign as many of your own guys as possible, realistically so. Whether that means Sutton, potentially Juju, maybe a Matt Filer, some lower-level guys like Tyson Alualu and Zach Banner, and potentially Chris Wormley, guys like that. And then you kind of see where you're at cap-wise after that. To those names, I think I would like Everett more than Williams, but since you have Ebron, I don't know if they would go after Everett, and Everett may cost more than what you can really handle.
If they are to sign, and they very well could add another guy, to the position group rooms at both those positions. But if they do, man, it's going to be cheap. Alex and I have thrown around Jesse James quite a bit, and we would get in trouble for tampering at this point because Jesse James is obviously still under contract with the Detroit Lions. But should he get cut, man, he would be a prime candidate to. And I know a lot of people are wrinkling up their noses, but it's what the Steelers do, and running back, you would think it'd be somebody on the cheap, something that here's generally what they do. Any outside additions that they usually do are normally names that still doesn't prevent them from adding adding people at the same position via the draft there. So I'm not saying that they won't add a free agent running back or a free agent tight end here between now and the draft, but if they do, I would expect it to be cheap.
Yep, I would as well. Right now, the names we've kind of focused and circled have been ex-Steelers, whether that's B.J. Finney or Jesse James or Kelvin Beachum. All feel like viable options to return, in part because the Steelers know who they are, and in part because they should be cheap on the open market. Eric Coakley says, I was surprised. Very little talks about Ben being comeback player of the year. I mean, my vote would have gone to Alex Smith. I know what Ben went through, but, Alex Smith went through 10x what Ben went through. And I know Ben obviously was the better quarterback, had the better season. Overall, the fact that Alex Smith at least played and played reasonably well and helped Washington, albeit in the NFC East, make the playoffs, I think makes it justifiable to give him the award.
Yeah, I mean, I was more surprised that Ben got a vote, to be honest with you, more than anything. Not saying that it may have been not totally unexpected there, but man, you watch that 30 for third or it's what is it?
60.
E60 on Alex Smith and all that he had to do overcome there. Whew, boy, that and no disrespect to Ben whatsoever, because Ben obviously came back from a very, very serious injury and surgery and all like that. And props to, if it wasn't for Alex Smith, it'd been hard it'd be hard seeing Ben not get it. But my vote would have went for Alex Smith.
Be sure if you guys could be so kind, like the stream as well, get more people into the chat. Let me go back through the questions here, because I know we have a good one I saw coming up. Pitman says, Alex or Dave, will you take Javonte Williams over Najee Harris? I would not. Would you, Dave?
Not from where I'm at or what I've seen so far, no.
Okay. Paul Brown says, any word on Joel Corey coming in soon for salary cap analysis? Any plans to have Joel Corey on the show?
Yeah, we'll have him at some point here in the next couple of weeks here. Obviously the demand for him right now is pretty high anyway after the season, doing radio interviews and team look aheads and those kind of things. So we'll definitely effort him, and got a few other national guys kind of in mind to maybe have on the podcast as well too.
Pittsburgh plays. Do you think that Kyle Trask will be realistically picked by the Steelers? Do you think it's a good pick? I'm working right now on a profile of Kyle Trask. I just watched my first game of his today. I think he could be in play. Again, if the Steelers deem him as a franchise guy, I think you have to go after him. Do I think it'd be a good pick? It's still too early for me to say, but I can see the allure of Trask, 6'5", 240, big, strong, successful in the SEC. I could see that at a baseline level being very attractive to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, I could as well too. Look, as we talk about these what are deemed kind of the top five, globally, I guess, if you will. A lot of them have a lot of good tape there. Now, obviously, not all those guys are going to pan out, as history tells us as well too. So, my hope is if they and Alex kind of hit on this when he wrote about this morning here, is that it's time to get back in the process of evaluating that position hard and heavy. If you decide to go that way, and obviously if not, then you have a year with the current staff. And look, make no mistake, you got a new staff here overall as well too. For the most part, you want to see how Canada and all these guys go through that same process here. I don't do it just I'm not taking the fifth quarterback if just for the sake that he's the fifth one and I better grab one. Right. It better be one that I like, meaning the Steelers in the eye portion of it there. I mean, if they do that and it doesn't have the look or smell to it as, well, we just grabbed the last one, then have at it. Personally, I'm still not to the point where I think they'll do that, but just once again, just because I don't think they will do it, in the first or second round, doesn't mean they can't or won't.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it could be a situation where their number 2 or number 3 quarterback is still there. Let's just say that they happen to really like Kyle Trask, and he's the number 2 quarterback on their board, or has a grade that's a 9.0, and they think he's a franchise guy, and he's there at 24. Then you take him, and you live with the hopefully you get it right. You live with the consequences if you don't. But if that's your guy, then that's your guy. Dominant Persona says, unpopular opinion, AD was way more dominant. Says 3 technique, front 7, not as talented as Pitts. That's fair. And again, I'm not going to yell at anybody who votes for Aaron Donald. I totally understand that, but I don't think anyone should yell at the 20 voters who picked TJ Watt, because obviously he has an extremely strong case to win the award as well. Mike Adesso, Dave, when are you doing your first mock? Alex, any upcoming live mock draft streams coming up? Last one was fun. I'm not sure when the next one for me will be. Dave, when is your first mock going to come out?
I mean, it's obviously coming up sometime soon. Usually around, I think sometimes I try to put them out before I go out of town in February, or sometimes it's like the week I get back. So it depends on how much tape I can watch now that the season's over here in the next week or two. But it is forthcoming, and as usual, the early ones, I know less about players than I do, obviously, than the later ones. I might surprise a person or two here in the first couple rounds of my first mock of 2021. We'll see.
Can you give us any inkling of where your head might be for number 24, or are you still totally undecided?
I'm totally undecided.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Paul Brown says, given what we saw last night and where we are with O-line, any chance the Steelers don't take offensive linemen in the first round? Is there a huge disparity in the talent between Leatherwood, Cosmi, Vera Tucker, and Jenkins? No, I think they're all kind of clumped together, and I have a report coming up tomorrow on Notre Dame left tackle Liam Eichenberg, who I'm a big fan of. I really like Eichenberg. I think even more than Alex Leatherwood, to be honest with you, Dave. So I think that they're all kind of clumped together in that tier 2. The problem is, generally speaking, even the tackles that don't go early, they're going to go either late in the first round or early in the second round. You kind of get that run on tackles again because all those bad teams, most of them have bad offensive lines. And so now maybe they got their quarterback at 2 or 3, and now they're going to circle back top of the second and get that offensive lineman. And so I don't think any of those guys, maybe one of those guys, but most of those guys are not going to be there at 55 for the Steelers.
I mean, I think get back to the root of his question there, Alex. Is it unthinkable that Steelers wouldn't draft an offensive lineman in the first round? I mean, I think it's totally plausible that they could go a different direction. And if they did, other than let's say tackle, I would think it would be for a running back or a quarterback. Really, is how I kind of envision. Because look, I don't think anybody at this point, even though it's still way early in the process and a lot can happen, I'll tell you this: I have Pitts ranked number 1 as at tight end, but that's receiving tight end as well too, because he's not much of a blocker there. But I don't think really you can find anybody that really thinks maybe Pitts out of Florida will be on the board, at 24. So to me, is Freiermuth, worthy of the 24 overall? Yeah, I don't think so. Personally, I from where I sit so far, what I've seen, I don't think so there. So odds tell you that they're probably going to go offensive side of the ball here. So if it's not tackle, then yeah, you would think it might be running back or quarterback. Are the odds good that it will be a tackle? I think the odds are decent that it could be a tackle.
Right. Or even a center. If Creed Humphrey is someone they really like. I mean, that's always a possibility too, depending on what happens with Marquise Pouncey.
Yeah, I want to get deeper into his tape and them short arms, man.
I knew you were going to say every time. Poor Creed Humphrey. Works his tail off.
Can he feed himself? Does his mom have to feed him? Or?
I would not say that to Creed Humphrey's face. Jason Bodine. Hey, Dave and Alex. Alex might be the nickname for both of us here. Mad respect for Donald, but Watt should be this year's Defensive Player of the Year. There, I said it. I can move on now. I'm with you, Jason. I think he should have been, but I'm not going to harp on it too much because we're all going to move on here.
Yeah, but I imagine there are a lot of people breaking some stuff around the houses.
Maybe present company included.
Yeah.
Thoughts on AB mentioning him still being in contact with Coach Tomlin? That's fine. I mean, they can talk to whoever they want to talk to. Hey, I'm not even bothered by AB winning a Super Bowl. I'm not going to pretend like this is some sort of rags to riches story where he's some sort of great redemption arc. But I'm not going to. I don't have that hate in my heart to hold a grudge against AB or Bell any longer.
Right. Do I like the way it played out with him? Absolutely not. But someone got on me yesterday during the Super Bowl saying, well, just bringing up the sheer fact that, that Antonio Brown, now a Super Bowl champion. How does that set? Not overall disrespect for Brown. My God, I spent however many seasons, every Monday it seems like trying to come up with superlatives to describe his play on the field. I mean, the guy's a phenomenal wide receiver, and really he showed on that one route in the end zone for that touchdown that he can still get it done there. So look, once again, I don't like the way it went down with him in his final days, obviously in Pittsburgh, and then obviously everything that's transpired with him in Oakland and that kind of stuff. But it doesn't keep me up late at night or anything like that. That those kind of things. Good for him. It happened. It's over with.
And I read a tweet, and I didn't investigate it any further, but apparently on that touchdown AB scored, he ran the wrong route, but he still made it work, and that's his classic AB right there. Even when he's wrong, he still ends up finding a way to make it work, on the field at least. Young Whitey says, have you guys covered Juju wanting to possibly leave if we can't pay him what he feels he's worth? Yeah, we've written up a ton of Juju comments and interviews he's done in the last couple of weeks. Obviously, he should get paid what he's worth. He will get paid handsomely. If the Steelers can't do that, then he is going to walk, and that's a totally fair stance that I think any player should and often does take. A couple more questions here. Again, be sure to ask questions in the chat for Dave and I to answer. Let me find one here. Mark Leslie, more of a comment than a question, says, always sad when football season is over, but you guys keep me well entertained with pre-draft talk. Here's to another season. Definitely, Mark. Thank you for sticking with us. Eric Coakley says, how should the Steelers prepare contracts now for rebuilding? Do you worry they kick too much down the road? This is probably a question more in your space, Dave.
Well, I mean, what do you think they should or they shouldn't? We know for almost a fact they're going to do it with Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt with restructures. They handle it. If everybody didn't get a chance to listen to the Breeze Roethlisberger segment of the podcast this morning, we cover a lot of potentially what the Steelers might do. And obviously we've talked about what the Steelers might do with Roethlisberger several times over the course. Well, shoot, dating back all the way to August there with the 4-year extension with no new money, those kind of things there. But pay close attention and read the post that I also did on what the Saints did with Breeze here just recently as well too, because you could quite possibly see the Steelers take the same path. Assuming they do some sort of extension with Roethlisberger here in the next 4 or 5 weeks, the same path with Roethlisberger a year from now that the Saints just took with Breeze, meaning that get him in a position where they can lower whatever base salary they give him if indeed 2021 is his last year, and then hold him onto the roster and not cut him, retire him, or whatever until after June 1st to kind of stretch. Well, not kind of to stretch out the dead money over a course of 2 years instead of having all of it accelerate into 2022 there. So, who else? Look, it's going to be It's likely to be Roethlisberger, obviously, with some sort of an extension that's going to set the team up for dead money in 2022 and possibly 2023, depending on what they work out with him a year from now. Hayward, the moment Hayward signed that contract, I wrote in that very post that they expect them to restructure him this offseason. They're going to do that. They need the cap space there. Tuitt, the bank of, I affectionately call it the bank of Tuitt, just like it was the old bank of Roethlisberger for several years there. They've restructured him several times. There's no reason to think with his age and the way that Tuitt played this past season that they won't go and get the other, what was it, $4 or $5 million, whatever it was, amount via restructure with him that way as well too. Is there a fear in doing that? Well, look, how can you not do it? I guess if you want the cap space to work with this year, you're almost forced to do it. Whether or not it's a good thing, if Tuitt stays healthy and Hayward stays healthy and they get out of the franchise quarterback business here by 2022, well, then it's kind of gonna, and if the cap escalates the way we think it might escalate there, then it's just going to be a small can in the road, if you will. That way. It goes along with I know people don't like to hear it, but it's kind of the Steelers like spending up until the cap, up until the cap and always have here. And it's just kind of the sins that go along with having a franchise quarterback that constantly remains in the top, 5, 6, 7 at his position in the league. There, it's just kind of the sins, to be able to accommodate the cap space, or the cap charge, the yearly cap charge of a franchise quarterback. You got to do some maneuvering around there, especially when the Steelers have such a high rate of re-signing a lot of their top draft picks over the years and getting them signed to second deals and third deals sometimes.
Yeah, I don't think the philosophy would change a whole lot even in a rebuild mode. Now, what could change it is if Omar Khan leaves at some point, if Kevin Colbert, whenever he retires, which will be much sooner than later. I mean, that just having new personnel could change the philosophy of how they do contracts. And so that will probably be the biggest driver to any sort of potential shift, more so than the mode they're in, whether they want to win a Super Bowl or whether or not they're rebuilding or, retooling, whatever word you want to use to describe the situation.
We're going to get a good idea whether or not this team's ready to shift philosophies either during the next few weeks, should they decide to extend a guy like, say, Steven Nelson or David DeCastro, but really bigger picture here, they're obviously going to sign TJ Watt to $30 million or roughly thereabouts per year contract by the time the 2021 season gets underway. When they do, it'll be interesting to see how they treat his contract if there's a change in philosophy, because normally over the years, non-quarterbacks don't get any fully guaranteed money outside of what the player gets in the first year of the deal, meaning signing bonus. Really signing bonus is usually the only fully guaranteed amount, but for all practical purposes, the first year base salary is, and roster bonus is as well too. Now they usually build in the roster bonuses into these contracts, but maybe to save a little additional cap space before the start of the season, would the Steelers consider maybe fully guarantee, in lieu of the first year cash flow for Watt, which probably going to be around, I don't know, $45-50 million in total take home between signing bonus and everything in 2021. In lieu of that, will they maybe decreases year one cash flow in lieu of giving them fully guaranteeing maybe his second or third year? That will be a huge shift in Steelers philosophy when it comes to contracts for non-quarterbacks. So that's definitely a line I have in the sand, and we'll be looking forward to whenever they get the deal done with Watt, looking at the structure of that contract and see if it matches really the contract structure they've had for non-quarterbacks and lucrative deals for years and years and years.
Eric also asked, what do you expect the coaching staff to look like in 2022? That's a real dart throw. Who knows? You could see shifts at multiple different spots. And I should note, while we're talking coaching staff, the Steelers also hired Matt Tomshow as their quality control coach. That seems to be Matt Canada's guy, and they work together at LSU and Pitt. So Tomshow following Canada's promotion to Pittsburgh.
And he was also at Maryland for a little bit too.
Right. With Canada, 2018.
I forgot to research that. I wrote it up, and I know the two were together at LSU and Pitt. I
think Maryland, because Canada was last. I think Canada's last year at Maryland was 2018. Then he had 2019 out of football, and then came to Pittsburgh in 2020. I think.
Okay, so they weren't at Maryland together then.
No, I think they were.
Okay, they quite. It wouldn't surprise me if they were.
Right.
I forgot to look that part of the timeline up there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure because was Canada at Maryland in 2018? I think that was his last year. I'm pretty sure.
That was because that was McFarland's freshman year, right?
Right. So yeah, they had to work together. Then Tomshow in Canada in 2018.
Okay, well there we go. These two know each other.
Yep, for sure. A couple more questions here before we finish out the stream. Pop345 says, would you like linebacker in the second round because Williams was a problem and we can save like $4 million? I don't know, maybe Dylan Moses or the guy from Michigan. When you get into the second round, even the first round, Pop, it's hard to really assign a position. Maybe let's see what happens to Vince. I'm not 100% opposed to the idea, but I was still happy with the job Spillane did. I think that is still lower on the needs than where most fans come in at. So potentially, depending on board, you're at 55 overall. Who knows how the draft was going to go? But I'm not going to close the door on the idea.
Yeah, I think you got to leave the notion open, and and maybe even first round. Even though I don't think that's the way it's going to go. We see that Zaven Collins mocked to him quite a bit already by national pundits like Zerline and Mel Kiper Jr. and all like that. I'll be surprised if it's not offense in the first round, and boy, they could use about 8 picks in the first 2 rounds, quite honestly. When it comes to filling some of these holes there, man, it's a shame they probably didn't feel a little bit more confident about Ulysses Gilbert, right now, but they might get in a position where they almost have to maybe rely on him a little bit more. Him and Marcus Allen, assuming Marcus Allen should be back at least for the summer via what is he exclusive rights, right?
Exclusive rights, yeah. He should be back or restricted. I don't remember which.
Right, to me, and I understand why people asking or saying, yeah, they need to get a linebacker. I will not be surprised if at some point during this draft that they draft linebacker. Mm-hmm. They probably should, an inside linebacker. I'm just not so convinced it would be with the first two the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. What was I going to say? I don't remember my other thought there. But let's go on to the next question here. Also from Benor Johnson. Do you think we should trade up for a quarterback, Mac Jones, Trey Lance, to battle Dwayne for that backup spot, given that Mason Rudolph will most likely not be extended after the 2021 season? I mean, if I was trading up and draft a quarterback, I mean, yeah, they can battle for the spot. Obviously, they're going to make the roster. But it's less about that and more about we think you're the long-term heir. So I don't know what their role would be year one. They would, of course, battle for probably that number 3 spot, probably just waltz into it and take that number 3 spot and then maybe be your week 1 starter in 2022. But it's all about, a long-term view with taking a quarterback like that, especially if you're going to trade up for one. And then Pop345 also says, do you think Christian Darrisaw can be at 24? I would love that pick, but I don't know. Yeah, I think we have a report from Josh Carney going up on Darrisaw in the next couple of days. Really good athlete, someone that functions extremely well in space, would probably improve the Steelers' screen game quite a bit. So I think you can throw him in the mix with Eichenberg and Leatherwood and Cosme to, I think, a lesser extent of all being viable options at pick number 24. John Keir, what is a realistic expectation for Ben Roethlisberger's play in 2021? Is it unreasonable to think he can play better next season despite a poor finish? Yeah, I think that, you look at the first 11 weeks and how well Ben played. I mean, there are aspects of his game that he has to tweak and correct and hopefully, at least not regress in. But I think Ben can still play at a high enough level to be your starting quarterback in 2021.
Got to be able to push the football down the field more regularity. Can't expect him to throw 45 times a game. Got to surround him with some sort of running game. Going to have to, whether it be pistol or whatever, going to have to use play action more. A lot of I just rattled off a lot of gotta, look, I don't think they're bringing if they decide to bring him back. I think their reasoning behind it will be because they think they can have enough changes in personnel and scheme on offense where they can basically revert back to the Roethlisberger several years ago with that lean on the running game there. Not expected to throw 40. So look, he's got to get the deep ball better too, man. They got to figure out a way to have Ben Roethlisberger have some of these games where his intended air yards are in the 9-yard category, and in the same breath, the completed air yards in that same game is 7 or more. They've absolutely got to do that. You just cannot rely on throw short, run long. If there's anything that we learned this past year, you can't. And what amazes me is when you look at the way those key metrics with the intended air yards with Tom Brady, really went up this past season there, based on going back to 2016 and all. So if you're going to be have the kind of play that play a quarterback that Roethlisberger is at this stage of the career, meaning not the guy that you're going to want to rely on a lot to extend the play, then you're going to have to do something else. You're going to have to change, several other things in his game there. So, I mean, obviously the odds are against him, at his age and the way he's played the last several years there. But once again, I don't think that if the Steelers bring him back, it's just not. It shouldn't be just for a cordial world tour. Right. It should be because they honestly think what we think doesn't matter. It depends on what they think. If they honestly think that he can compete for a championship and they can surround him with the right personnel and have the defense, yada yada, then that's why they're going to bring him back, or at least I would hope that's the reason that if they decide to bring him back. Does that make sense?
It does. Couple more questions just to finish things out. C4, the one with the visual, says, do you think the Steelers should try to get Marcus Mariota in a trade or this offseason or next year's offseason? Not this year, next year. Maybe we could discuss it a little bit more, but don't have a lot of interest there in Mariota. Andrew Bailey says, when was the last time Ben has been top 5 at his position? That's a good question. There's always good quarterbacks. The first year that came to my mind was 2017, but I don't know because I don't keep a tally of the year-by-year ranking, but it's been at least a couple of years because top 5 is a tough list to crack.
Yeah, I mean, the year that he threw for what? How many yards did he throw for that year? 5,000 something?
Is that 2017 or 2018?
Trying to remember, but he was obviously he was near the top in passing. What levels are we talking? Are we talking just all across the board?
I think, just your rankings that Ben's playing at a top 5 level, I think is an interesting question.
It's been several years, obviously.
Yeah. And then I think the last question we had here, unless
2016, 2017, something like that.
Right.
Last time that he had, a good deep ball,
Right.
I really think they got to do something to get somebody with crap speed that can get down the field. And apologies to James Washington, a guy I scouted and a guy I love coming out of Oklahoma State, and obviously Chase Claypool, to some degree has shown that he can get down the field as well too. But really, the last time Ben Roethlisberger has been considered a deep ball threat was when he had somebody that's 7 yards stacking somebody on the outside with, i.e. Mike Wallace or Martavis Bryant, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, I'm not opposed to speed. Speed kills, and that can obviously be a big component of your offense for sure. Garrett Slingerland says, sorry I'm late, fellas. Thanks for putting this on for us. Thanks for being here, Garrett. Appreciate it. Tyler Moore says, fair to say that if Juju and Bud sign elsewhere, the Steelers get 2 third-round picks as draft compensation, probably a third for Juju. Bud, it just depends on the contract. If that A20 ACL forces a 1-year deal, then you may not get a third for it. I think we'll just have to see what that market's like and what that value comes in at, Tyler.
And will Bud Dupree sign before the during the prime of free agency, before the cutoff of when there's a certain date? It's usually, what is it, May something or another, I think
June, early June.
I'm trying to remember. I can't for the top of my head remember when the date is, but there's a cutoff date where signings after a certain date no longer count in the compensatory formula. And now with them making the changes where you can't sign and then cut a guy to impact the compensatory formula, those kind of things. Let's just say it's going to be interesting to see the timing of, assuming Bud Dupree does not re-sign with the Steelers, when he does sign. If there's a team that's got a wink nudge with Bud Dupree, maybe they wait until past a certain date so they don't have to take it as a ding on the compensatory formula.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's a distinct possibility. Last question here comes from Brandon Rita. Assuming Juju leaves, who is your slot receiver in 3 wideout sets? I think Claypool plays more in the slot, and they draft somebody like an Amari Rogers out of Clemson. I think would be a great fit in the Steelers offense, but he'll probably wind up in Baltimore now that T. Martin has been hired there. So we'll see.
So you're with it. I got a lot of pushback on Twitter on that suggesting that if Juju flies the coop, that more than likely Claypool's going to be that big slot. Now look, they'll move guys around.
Sure.
It's not going to be, it's not going to be 100%. But I mean, Claypool did it in college and he did it well. And you want kind of those guys, as the great Richard Mann would say, dig the safeties out. And I always loved that. I always loved love that term ever since he uttered that kind of stuff. But you could realistically see Claypool being the predominant slot, correct?
Yeah, I think in terms of the in-house options between Deontay, Washington, and Claypool makes the most sense of those 3. Of course, if Ray comes back, which I assume he will, he'll see some time there. And again, they're almost guaranteed to draft a receiver, probably someone who's slot capable. But in terms of the in-house guys, I think Claypool is as good a bet as any for slot work. All right, Dave, that's going to wrap up today's stream. Appreciate you guys all being here. Again, I'll probably do these every other Monday. Probably the best thing that works for both of us. And if there's any sort of breaking news, then of course we can always do a stream. And just be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the stream, and check out the community tab for any updates on the schedule coming up. As always, Dave Bryan, thank you for being here alongside with us.
All right, thank you for having me, and thank you for everybody who tuned in, and thank you for putting up with me.
All right, guys. As always, be sure to stay tuned to this channel, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for being here.